All right, get ready to dive deep into this Cardinals-Rams game from the 28th. You guys wanted the breakdown, and we've got a stack of CBS Sports articles and stats right here ready to go. And let me tell you, right off the bat, this thing was a nail biter all the way to the end. 13-9 final score. Some crazy twists and turns in this one.
Yeah, it really flipped the script on everything we thought we knew about these teams.
For sure.
You've got the Rams, this offensive powerhouse, barely squeaking by, and the Cardinals, who are already out of the playoff picture, playing like they had everything on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of surprises, I was totally shocked to see Cooper Kupp only one catch for 29 yards the whole game. I mean, that's practically unheard of for him. What happened there?
Well, it really shows you how much the Cardinals defense keyed in on him. They knew he was the Rams' biggest weapon, so they probably double-teamed him all night, forced Stafford to look elsewhere.
Interesting. So did that strategy open things up for the other Rams receivers then, or did the Cardinals just completely shut them down across the board?
It was kind of a bit of both, I'd say.
Yeah.
Stafford ended up with a pretty average game, I guess. 189 passing yards, no touchdowns. Not a total disaster, but definitely not what we're used to from the Rams, you know?
Right, for sure. And then on the Cardinals side, you've got Kyler Murray. He threw for over 300 yards, which sounds pretty good on paper. But then you look closer and you see those two late-game interceptions. Ouch. Was that just him trying to force things under pressure, or were the Rams' defensive adjustments really that good?
It's hard to say for sure. But the Rams, they definitely made some key changes in the second half. It seemed like they figured out the Cardinals were targeting McBride on those quick slant routes, and they started dropping a safety down to cover them. That kind of forced Murray to hold the ball longer, make riskier decisions.
And one of those risky decisions led to the biggest moment of the game. 37 seconds on the clock, Ahkello Witherspoon, that diving interception in the end zone, game over. Talk about clutch.
That play was all Witherspoon's experience and instincts just shining through right there. He read Murray like a book, stayed disciplined in coverage, and made the play when it mattered most. And the fact that it survived a video review just adds to the drama, right?
Oh, absolutely. Can you imagine being a Rams fan in that moment? The tension must have been unbelievable. CBS Sports even called it a season-saving play, which might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but it definitely cemented their playoff spot, that's for sure. And depending on how other games shook out, it might have even clinched the NFC West for them.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Rams are in a pretty good spot for the playoffs no matter what. Clinching the division early would just give them some breathing room, which is always nice, especially with how tight things are in the NFC.
Right. All right. So we've got the Rams barely escaping with a win and the Cardinals showing some fight, even though their season's basically over. But before we move on, we have to talk about Trey McBride. 12 catches, 123 yards, and his first touchdown of the season. What a performance.
Yeah, for sure. And it was his 100th reception of the season, too. Can you believe that?
Wow, that's awesome.
It's a shame it came at a loss, but this game definitely had to give Cardinals fans some hope for the future. McBride really stepped up big time against a tough Rams team.
Yeah, he did. So, are we looking at a potential star in the making here? Could McBride become a cornerstone of this Cardinals offense as they rebuild for next season?
Oh, it's definitely possible. He showed his talent in this game, and his ability to find those holes in coverage. If you can build on this performance and develop a good connection with Murray, he could be a real problem for defenses down the line.
All right, so we've covered the Rams' narrow escape, the Cardinals' surprising resilience, and McBride's breakout game. But there's another piece to this puzzle I want to look at. The Rams' offensive line. They gave up 3 sacks and had a bunch of holding penalties. Is this a one-time thing, or is this a sign of something bigger? It's definitely something to keep an eye on. Their starting right tackle, Rob Havenstein, he was out with that shoulder injury, and his backup, Joe Noteboom, he had a rough night filling in. 3 holding penalties is a pretty clear sign that a lineman's struggling to keep up with the speed and power of those defenders.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's got to be a concern for the Rams going forward, right? Even if Stafford shakes off the rust and their star receivers get going, a weak offensive line can totally derail their playoff hopes. They got to protect Stafford, give him time to work his magic.
Oh, absolutely. A solid O-line is the foundation of any good offense. And if the Rams can't fix that, it won't matter how talented they are at the skill positions. It'll be really interesting to see how they address this in the coming weeks.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got this interesting contrast emerging. The Rams with a potentially shaky offensive line, but a defense that's starting to click. And the Cardinals, who might have found a gem in McBride, but are still searching for consistency on both sides of the ball. Where do we go from here? Let's take a look at some of the other performances, some of the stats that maybe flew under the radar. There's always more to the story, and that's what we're going to dig into in part 2. Welcome back to our deep dive into this Cardinals-Rams game. Now let's shift gears a bit and dig into some of the under-the-radar stats, maybe some of the performances that might have been missed in all the initial excitement.
I love this part. It's like finding buried treasure, the stuff that's hidden beneath those obvious storylines. Hit me with those stats.
All right, well, one that really stands out is the time of possession. Believe it or not, the Cardinals actually held the ball for almost 14 minutes longer than the Rams did.
Wait, hold on. They had the ball for longer, but still hots the game. That doesn't seem right.
Right. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it really reinforces what we were talking about earlier about the Rams' defensive adjustments. It seems like they were totally content to let the Cardinals have the ball, knowing that they could trust their defense to come up with those big stops.
So it's almost like they were setting a trap, letting the Cardinals wear themselves out before delivering that final blow.
That's a great way to put it. And that final blow was, of course, that Witherspoon interception. But let's look at some other efficiency numbers. The Cardinals converted 6 out of 13 third down attempts, while the Rams only converted 6 out of 15.
So even with less time of possession, the Rams were actually slightly more efficient on third downs. That's interesting.
Exactly. It kind of suggests that while the Cardinals could move the ball between the 20s, they struggled to keep those drives alive and convert on those crucial third downs. That's often the difference between a scoring drive and a punt.
Makes sense. Okay, how about red zone efficiency? That's always a big one, right? How well can a team capitalize on those scoring opportunities?
Yeah, and this is where the Cardinals really struggled. They only converted 1 out of 4 red zone trips into touchdowns. That's a 25% efficiency rate. Yikes.
Ouch. No wonder they only scored 9 points, despite all those passing yards.
Exactly. They were moving the ball, but they just couldn't finish those drives. The Rams, on the other hand, converted 1 out of 2 red zone trips into touchdowns. Not amazing, but still better than the Cardinals.
So it was the Rams who were more opportunistic, making the most of their limited scoring chances. It was like a classic case of efficiency over volume.
You got it. And that's often the difference in those close, hard-fought games. The team that can capitalize on their chances, even if they don't have a ton of them, usually ends up winning.
Now, you mentioned earlier we'd also be talking about some of the unsung heroes from this game, the players who didn't necessarily light up the stat sheet but still made a big impact. Let's start with the Rams. Who impressed you?
Well, their defensive line deserves a ton of credit. They might not have gotten a bunch of sacks, but they were constantly putting pressure on Kyler Murray, forcing him into those bad throws we talked about earlier.
Yeah, guys like Bobby Brown, Michael Hoach come to mind. I remember Hoach even blocked an extra point attempt, which was huge in a game this close.
Absolutely. Those hidden plays, the ones you don't always see on the highlight reels, they can be just as important as those game-changing moments. They can really shift the momentum and disrupt the other team's rhythm.
Totally. And on the Cardinals side, were there any unsung heroes that stood out to you?
Yeah, their offensive line deserves some props. They kept Murray upright for most of the game, which is pretty impressive considering they were facing a really tough Rams pass rush.
Yeah, and they weren't completely useless in the run game either. Even though Connor was dealing with that knee injury, they did manage to open up some running lanes early on.
Right. Players like Kelvin Beachum and DJ Humphries, the Cardinals tackles, they played solid games, even if they won't be getting the same attention as McBride. They did a lot of the dirty work that allowed the Cardinals offense to function.
So it wasn't all doom and gloom for the Cardinals. There were definitely some bright spots, some individual performances they can try to build on for next season.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what makes the NFL so interesting. Even in defeat, there are always things to learn, positives to take away.
Now, I want to zoom out for a second, think about the bigger picture of this game. This was a late season matchup, two teams heading in very different directions.
Totally. The Rams, even with some offensive struggles, they were fighting for a playoff spot, a division title. The Cardinals, they were already out of the playoffs, so they were playing for pride, maybe a chance to spoil things for the Rams a little bit.
Right, and it's always fascinating to see how teams respond in those situations. Do the Cardinals, with nothing really to play for, just come out flat? Or do they rise to the occasion, try to prove they're better than their record?
And on the Rams side, there's that pressure of expectations. They've been to the Super Bowl. They have this star-studded roster. So anything less than a deep playoff run is going to be seen as a disappointment.
And that pressure can be a double-edged sword, can't it?
Yeah.
It can push you to play your best, but it can also lead to mistakes, mental lapses, if you let it get to you.
Exactly. And in this game, It seemed like both teams were kind of feeling the weight of those expectations. The Cardinals, they were loose, playing free. They gave the Rams all they could handle. And the Rams, maybe they were feeling that pressure to win. They were a little tight, a little hesitant on offense.
It's amazing how much psychology plays into sports. It's not just about physical talent, it's about mental toughness, about managing expectations, handling the pressure. It's about believing in yourself and your team, even when things aren't going your way.
Well said. That's one of the things that makes sports so captivating. It's not just a game, it's like a reflection of life, with all its complexities, its challenges. And speaking of challenges, let's shift our focus back to the field for a bit. What about some of the specific plays that really jumped out at you?
Yeah, let's do it. Any moments that really stuck with you?
Well, beyond the obvious game winner, one play that comes to mind is a defensive stand by the Rams in the third quarter. The Cardinals had driven all the way down to the Rams' 7-yard line, first and goal. But the Rams' D held strong. They forced 4 straight incompletions. Talk about a momentum swing.
That's what they call bending but not breaking. The Cardinals had them on the ropes, but the Rams' defense, they dug deep and refused to give up that touchdown. That's the kind of defensive grit that wins championships.
Exactly. It sent a message to the Cardinals that they weren't going to just stroll into the end zone. They were going to have to earn every inch. And speaking of earning it, were there any plays on the Cardinals side that impressed you?
Oh, for sure. Early in the game, Murray hit McBride for a 34-yard gain. It was a beautifully thrown ball right over the outstretched arms of a Rams defender, and McBride made a fantastic catch in traffic. It was a glimpse of what they could be as a duo.
Yeah, that play really showcased the potential of that Murray to McBride connection, something for Cardinals fans to get excited about going forward.
So as we're wrapping up part 2 of this Dup Dive, what are some of the key takeaways you want our listener to walk away with?
I think this game was a reminder that in the NFL, any given Sunday, anything can happen. The Cardinals, even though they were underdogs, out of playoff contention, they pushed the Rams to the absolute limit.
It was a real testament to their resilience, their fighting spirit. They didn't back down, even when they were facing a team with so much more to play for.
Exactly. And for the Rams, I think it was a good lesson in humility. They learned that even against a team that on paper seems inferior, you can't take anything for granted. Every game is a battle, and you have to bring your A game every single week.
They definitely needed that Witherspoon interception to pull out the win. Otherwise, they could be looking at a much tougher road to the playoffs.
Absolutely. And I think this game also highlighted the importance of coaching, of those in-game adjustments. The Rams, their ability to adapt in the second half to shut down what the Cardinals were doing well, that was huge in getting the win.
Yeah, it wasn't just about the players executing. It was about the coaches seeing what the Cardinals were doing, finding those weaknesses, and figuring out how to exploit them. They made the right calls at the right time, and that made all the difference. And of course, let's not forget about those unsung heroes, those players who might not have made the headlines, but whose contributions were just as important.
Right, those defensive linemen who created all that pressure, the offensive linemen who kept their QBs clean, the special teams guys who made those clutch plays, they all deserve some love. They may not get all the glory, but they're the foundation of any winning team.
Absolutely. They do all the dirty work, the thankless tasks, but without them, the stars wouldn't shine as brightly. So, in part 3, we'll turn our attention to the future. What does this game mean for the Cardinals and Rams moving forward? What are their strengths, their weaknesses? What kind of adjustments do they need to make as they head into the playoffs? Or for the Cardinals, into the offseason?
Yeah, and we'll also explore some of the bigger trends, the storylines that emerged from this game. What does it tell us about the state of the NFC West? What are the implications for the league as a whole?
All right, so stick around for part 3, where we'll continue to unpack this game and look ahead to what the future holds for both the Cardinals and the Rams. Okay, we've really broken down this Rams-Cardinals game, found some hidden stories, and now it's time to look ahead. What did this game teach us about these two teams, and what are the big questions hanging out there as we head into the playoffs? And for the Cardinals, the offseason.
For the Rams, I think it really comes down to consistency, especially on offense. I mean, they've got so much talent on that roster,
Yeah.
but they haven't really put it all together yet.
Yeah, for sure. So where do they need to focus their energy? What are the biggest things they need to fix if they want to make a deep playoff run?
Well, for starters, Stafford needs to get that sharpness back, Cut down on those uncharacteristic mistakes. He had okay numbers, but some of the throws just seemed off, like he's still shaking off some rust.
And then there's that offensive line issue we keep coming back to. They can't let Stafford get beat up every week. What are their options there?
Well, hopefully Havenstein can come back from that shoulder injury and solidify that right side of the line. But even if he does, they need more from those other guys up front. Joe Noteboom, he's got to step up if he's going to be the backup.
Yeah, no doubt. So, offensive line is a question mark. Stafford needs to find his groove. But what about the other skill players? We didn't see much from the Rams receivers besides that one Cup catch.
That's right. That's another area where they need to be more consistent. If teams are going to double Cup all game long, other guys have got to make plays. Van Jefferson, Tutu Atwell, Ben Skowronek, they need to be threats that defenses have to worry about.
Okay, so the offense has some work to do, but how about that Rams defense? They looked pretty good, especially in the second half.
Yeah, the defense is their strong point right now, that's for sure. Witherspoon's pick was a perfect example of them making a game-changing play, but it's more than just him. That whole secondary is playing at a high level, and their D-line is creating pressure pretty consistently.
That defensive front was all over the place. They were in Murray's face all night, making him scramble, forcing bad throws. They might not always get the sack, but they make things tough for the QB.
Exactly, and if they can keep that intensity up, keep forcing those turnovers, they're going to be a tough matchup for anyone in the playoffs.
Okay, so for the Rams, the road to playoff success seems pretty clear, right? Fix that O-line, find some offensive balance, and keep that defense playing at a high level. Now let's talk about the Cardinals. Their season might be over, but what did we learn about their future from this game?
Well, I think it showed us that even though they've struggled, the Cardinals have some good pieces to work with. McBride becoming a reliable target, that's a huge development. If he keeps progressing, he could be one of the best tight ends in the league.
Yeah, that 12-catch game was no joke. Great hands, ran good routes, fought for extra yards. He looks like the real deal.
And Kyler Murray, even with the 2 picks, he's still got the talent to be a special quarterback. He's just got to improve his decision-making, especially at the end of games. Sometimes he tries to do too much, and that's when the mistakes happen.
He's young. He's still learning. He's got all the physical tools, so if he can figure out the mental part of the game, he could be a really dangerous player.
The Cardinals also got to figure out their defense. They had some moments, especially in the first half when they shut down Kupp and the Rams passing game, but they need to be more consistent.
Yeah, they were tough against the run early on, too. Connor couldn't get anything going. But in the second half, they seemed to wear down, and the Rams were able to move the ball more.
Exactly. Consistency is key. They need to play at a high level all 4 quarters, not just 2. And to do that, they might need to add some depth in the offseason.
So it sounds like the Cardinals have work to do, but there are reasons to be optimistic in Arizona. They have a young quarterback, a potential star tight end, and a defense that shows flashes.
If they make the right moves in the offseason, improve their defense, find more consistency, they could be back in the mix before you know it.
Now let's step back and look at the NFC West overall. What does this game tell us about where things stand in the division?
It's pretty clear that the Rams, even with their inconsistencies, they're still the team to beat. They have that experience, the talent, they know how to win, but the other teams are getting closer.
The Seahawks have been a surprise this year. Young team, lots of energy, and they're playing their best football right now.
And the 49ers, even with all their ups and downs, they're still really talented. They could be dangerous if they can stay healthy and find some consistency on offense.
So the NFC West is still one of the toughest divisions in the league. Every game is a dogfight, and anyone can beat anyone on any given week.
Yeah, that's what makes it so much fun to watch. You never know what's going to happen. Every week is a new challenge.
And finally, let's talk about the bigger picture, the whole NFL. What does this game tell us about the league in general?
I think it shows that defense is still a huge factor in this league. The Rams' defense, even with their offense struggling, they won the game. It proves that even in a league that's so focused on offense, teams that can play tough, physical defense still have an edge.
It's a reminder that football is a team sport, and you need all 3 phases working, offense, defense, special teams, to be successful. You can't just rely on outscoring your opponent every week. You got to be able to stop them, too.
Absolutely. This game was a reminder of the days when defense won championships, a reminder that in the NFL, games are often won and lost in the trenches.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I'd say never underestimate the power of heart and determination. The Cardinals, they had nothing to play for really, but they played with passion and toughness. They pushed the Rams all the way to the end. It just shows that in the NFL, if you believe and you fight hard, anything is possible.
Well said. That's the beauty of sports. The underdog always has a shot, and that's what keeps us coming back.
Exactly. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into this Rams-Cardinals game. Hope you all enjoyed it.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive exploring a different part of the sports world. Until then, keep learning, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep.